Bienvenidos, welcome, good morning, good afternoon to the second day of our the first international colloquium of Mexican and New Zealand studies. We're very excited that you could join us and for us to continue this conversation across the Pacific. And I'm sure today our presentations will be as interesting and fascinating as yesterday's. And it's great that our first panel focuses on indigenous art in music. And we are very fortunate to have presenters who are not only well-established academics, but also practitioners, performers. So that's really a treat for us. And I'm really, really happy to introduce our colleague from Massey University, Maxwel, Warren Maxwel, who is a professional working musician and composer with almost 2 decades. And he's performing in really, really well-known bands in New Zealand, Southside of Bombay, Trinity Roots, Little Bushman, and Pat Freddy's Drop. And Warren is an associate professor at Massey University in composition and performance, and in 2016 was inducted into the Institute's prestigious Hall of Fame. He has composed for film and television, and performed at numerous festivals, international festivals such as Byron Bay Blues Festival, Woodford Folk Festival, Celtic Connections, Woman New Zealand, Big Chill Festival UK, Roskilde Festival. And he composes and produces from his own recording studio in the beautiful South Wairarapa, which is not far from here. In October 2016, he was invited to Antarctica as part of Antarctica, New Zealand's Artist Community Outreach Program. And since then, he has campaigned fervently around environmental issues, focusing his composition and research around environmental connections. In 2018, he was commissioned to compose the opening of the New Zealand Arts Festival in Wellington, celebrating traditional Polynesian ocean navigation, which included a 300-piece choir. The event was attended by more than 20,000 people and recently won Best Arts or Cultural Event 2018 for the New Zealand Events Award. So thank you so much, Warren, for accepting our invitation and welcome.
Kia ora, Leonel. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. Yeah. So an absolute honor to be invited to this knowledge sharing across the Pacific, and hola and kia ora to professors, academics, and art lovers and music lovers alike. I'm just going to so ka nui te mihi ki o koutou I tēnei ao digital context. Ka nui te mihi ki o koutou whakapono, o koutou atua, o koutou whakapono tāwhito. I pay homage to your mountains, to your forests, to your rivers who have nurtured you and yours. Ka nui te mihi ki o koutou tipuna, your ancestors who have passed. Ka nui te mihi ki o koutou, kua taimai nei, hei whakatoha toha o koutou mātauranga who contribute to your culture and your generations. We, in Te Ao Māori, we always start our introduction with our whakapapa, which is our genealogy. We have a mountain, we have a river, we have canoes that we trace our lineage back to. So, ko mā tātua rātou ko takitimu ko Aurora oku waka, those are my canoes. My mountain is Maunga Pohatu. My river is Angi Taiki. My sub-tribes are Ngāti Whare, Ngāti Reru, Ngāti Rākai Pāka, and Ngāi Tūkairangi. My father is Ronald Maxwel. My mother is Barbara Maxwel. Ko Warren Maxwel, tōku ingoa, kia ora. So today's offering, I'm going to keep a vigilant eye on the clock here. Today's offering, which I feel very humbled I can contribute, I wanted to share with, I guess, my personal journey at the moment is connecting back to our natural world. As you mentioned, Leonel, very fervently passionate about our environment, as I think a lot of us are around the world. It's a global consideration. So my music is really connecting back to what we term te taio, the natural world. And I really wanted to explore making those connections in a deeper way possible, more so than just writing a composition about it, or not just, I'm not belittling that, but is there another way to connect people more? And I'll talk a little bit about it later, but there's something about being placed in the environment when we're experiencing music. So some of my performances have actually been in the area or on the hill or beside the river that I've written about, just to help connect people a little bit more with what the song is about. And I'll talk a little bit about Maori instruments, how I've been using new technologies and fusing that with ancient perspectives, and acknowledging, reconnecting back to the natural world. Oh, well, I'll admit, kia ora, kia ora. So a lot of the origins of Maori music start with our cosmology through a Maori lens, and it starts, way back with our gods, our atua, and the Maori consensus is that music and the emotive side of music started with our gods, and all of the dynamics that they I guess passed on down to us. Something that I've really been introduced to recently is the dilemma or the dichotomy that humans, we personify all of our gods in human form, but recent considerations have been to think outside, a bit wider than that, and thinking of our gods as the elements. And it's really about reframing and reimagining how we appreciate and acknowledge the elements more, which again is part of that reconnecting to the environment. I'll give you an example. So one of our atua is one of our gods. His name is Tāne. And Tāne was the god that separated our earth mother from the sky father. And, we've always, well, up until recently, had that vision of a very strapping god, kind of like Herculean, who's got his shoulders against Mother Earth and he's pushing the sky father away with his legs, But a recent conference I went to challenged us to think that Tāne, we might consider Tāne as being oxygen. So when the planet was in that primordial stage, toxic gases and all of that going around, it was actually oxygen and the increase of oxygen that pushed the stratosphere up. So you can imagine all of the oohs and the ahs in the audience when we just flipped it into a more sort of contemporary way. So yeah, I'm digressing already. But yeah, from Māori cosmology, there's a quote here, Kei te pō te timatanga o te waiatatanga, mai te atua. And that translates to, it was in the night that the gods sang the world into existence, from the world of light into the world of music. And I'm really interested to, explore this globally in other cultures as well. I'm just as much Scottish and English as I am Maori, so I'm very interested to find the parallels in terms of, beliefs, ancient beliefs, and to see if my Celtic ancestors, I'm pretty sure they did, had the same beliefs in terms of having a mountain, having a river, having sub-tribes and clans, which we know they did. So yeah, parallels. So here's a little rundown on some of our gods. There are lots of Maori gods, and here's just a few that are sort of, I guess, responsible for some of our instruments. So Ranginui, our Sky Father, is largely responsible for melodies, and again that ties into birds, how birds, fly through the skies, and we get a lot of melodies from birds. Then we have Papatuanuku, our Earth Mother, goddess of rhythms. A lot of that comes from the heartbeat. One of our gods, Ruamoko, is still in the womb of Papatuanuku, and he's the Atua, the god of earthquakes. So whenever we feel an earthquake, we say, oh, Ruamoko is having a bit of a twist in mum's tummy. And then we have Tane, Atua of the forest, Hinepu Te Hue, who is the female deity of gourds. And we have Tangaroa, the god of the ocean, Tawhiri Mātia, god of the winds, Hinirau Katauri, who is god of flutes, goddess of flutes, sorry. So I thought I'd play an example of some bird songs here. And you can just hear it. You can really hear a little example here that I recorded as part of my master's last year, just of the bird song. Hopefully you can hear it. And that was a dawn chorus, not far from where I live here. Just a variety of birds. The sun was coming up, and they were just in full chorus. And I think at that moment I really acknowledged and appreciated how lucky we still are to have an abundance of birds. There are some that we've lost, of course, and some that are endangered. And like you were saying before, Leonel, with the birds in Australia, we need to, bring more attention to our species that are diminishing. And I feel like playing, and composing songs like this and then disseminating out to as many people as possible is one way that could contribute to that. The next recording is of Waddell seals in Antarctica. I was very, very fortunate to go down there. And I put a hydrophone mic under the ice in the Ross Sea, and didn't really know what to expect. The microphone was so sensitive that I had to wait until all the scientists had gone to bed. So I put it under the ice around midnight. The ice is 2 meters thick, and then the water where we were, the sea under the ice, was 20 meters deep. I'll just play. So you can imagine when I came back the next morning, because I left it recording overnight for about 7 hours and had no idea what to expect, and then came back the next morning and put my headphones on and heard 7 hours of that, which I just feel is the most beautiful music I've heard, and that was in 2016, and I still, when I've heard that, it still makes me very, very happy. So I'll talk about Hinirau Katauri, our goddess of flutes. So the image here on the left is the case moth or the bag moth, and the belief is that that's our goddess. She's in there. She can't come out, so she's stuck in there. And then you'll see this flute in the wooden flute, which is that. is shaped around the case moth, and the music comes from her, from Hiniroka Tori. She's trapped in there. She can never get out. She comes out at night she pokes her head up to feed, but basically she's trapped in there. So she sings a melody to attract the male bag moth. He comes along, they copulate, procreate, and then one story is that she eats him. But I'll have to check that out. Yeah, it sounds a bit morbid. But yeah, again, a lot of Maori music inspired by nature, by things we see in nature. I'll go back. So I've really been enjoying researching, pre-European contact aspects and approaches to composition. So a lot of our composition is inspired by birdsong, by our atua, our gods, our elements, the things that we hear, the things that we see. And so this was a photo of me recording these little flags in Antarctica. So if I was to approach it from an indigenous Maori perspective, the belief is that it's Tawhiri Mātia, the gods of winds, who's making the flags flap. And as they flapped, they made this sound, this kind of flap, 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 flap. And what I'm really enjoying at the moment is taking indigenous approaches, but using modern technology to create compositions. So the image on the right there is the wave file of the wind flapping the flags, and then in Ableton Live, which is a new music software I'm learning to use, you can convert audio files into MIDI, and it does that automatically. And then once you've got that MIDI file, I can imprint that, and make a flute play it in my MIDI instrument pack, or make a drum kit play it, or a cello, or a bass, or a synthesizer. So what I love about that is that I'm just the conduit for Tawhiri Mātia, our god of winds. So I've got an example here. You'll hear a drum kit playing like a bebop jazz sort of pattern, and that's actually the wind in Antarctica that I've converted into MIDI and then imprinted that onto a digital drum kit to play. So hopefully it will work. This is an installation that we're putting in a gallery next weekend. All of those sounds were, apart from the car horns, were layers of sounds that I recorded in Antarctica, and that really strong, that punch, that kick, was a seal at the end there. They were the seals. So another provocation for ancient Maori melodies was the contours of mountains. And we get inspiration from everywhere we look. I think it was Beethoven as well. There's a quote: "For surely the woods, the trees, the rocks produce the echoes that man longs to hear." So even back then, Beethoven was very much inspired by nature and the countryside. So, taking melodies from the contours of these mountains, you can almost see the melodies there. There's a visual, it's a graphic score. And what I love about that is it connects a person to where they are or where they're from. So this is the mountain range out that I can see from my house. So if I was to compose this song, it would connect me to this area, this place. I'm probably going to run out of time to play that, but there's a link there that you're all welcome to click on. This is part of my master's that I finished last year. So I found this very ancient log down in one of the lakes and made this beautiful dulcimer out of it. And I had contact mics either side, so we could run it through a big PA audio system. What I found most about this that people loved is they were in awe of its ancientness, of how old it was. There was a sense of nostalgia. And again, trying to connect people back to our environment by asking them to, play this old log. There seemed to be more of a connection if I go down to the shop and buy a $200 electric guitar, it doesn't have the same kind of connecting mechanism that this log does. So I think that worked really well. Yeah.
Apologies, Warren, but we're coming to most of the end. Yeah.
That's actually that's perfect timing because that was the finish. So thank you everyone. Ka nui te mihi kia koutou. And I hope you've found something in there, or there might be something of interest in there. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Kapai, Warren. Thank you. I mean, there is a lot in there that we wish we could carry on listening to you, and it's been just wonderful. And now we move to Benjamín Juárez and Elias Morado. Benjamín Juárez is the director of the Center for Mexican Studies at UNAM-Boston. So he's in Boston now, a professor of fine arts and leadership and arts at Boston University, a member of the board of directors of Early Music America, and member of the Mexican Academy of History in the US. He was director of music and dance at UNAM, director of cultural dissemination at the Universidad Anáhuac Sur, Director General of the National Center for the Arts and Director of Linking of the Mora Institute before being appointed Dean of the Faculty of Fine Arts at the University of Boston. He has worked with the symphony orchestras of the state of Mexico and the Mexico City Philharmonic, and has conducted as a guest the main orchestras in Mexico as well as in Europe, the United States, and the People's Republic of China, where he conducted the Shanghai Philharmonic and was the first Latin American director to conduct in that country. His career has focused on the dissemination of Mexican and Hispanic music from the 16th to the 21st century. And his research of Mexican cathedral music reflected in the production of 12 CDs has earned him rave reviews in the United States and Europe, as well as a Latin Grammy nomination. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Dr. Benjamín Juárez. He's accompanied by Elias Morado, who holds a PhD in Latin American Studies from UNAM. He has a master's degree in Spanish and Hispanic American music from the Complutense University of Madrid. He obtained 3 diplomas in history, culture, and indigenous languages of Mexico. His work analyzes the history of music from a philosophical perspective, focusing on the modern culture. He's interested in the role of the indigenous people in the invention of the Mexican society after the conquest by examining their music and literary creations. And they'll be talking to us about musics of the Mexican people, the Aztecs. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for being here. So welcome, Benjamín and Elias.
Thank you so much, Leonel, and thank you, Warren, for your wonderful presentation and your introducing us to Papatanuku. So, kia ora. I would like to start as a prelude to Elias' presentation by remembering that the second writer from Latin America to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1967 was from Guatemala, Miguel Ángel Asturias. As his work is deeply influenced by his Mayan blood and the political oppression Guatemala lived and forced his exile, to Mexico and also to Europe. And as I read with great interest and wonder the doctoral dissertation of Elias Morado, with whom I have started very recently a conversation and plans for joint research, I remember the banquet speech of Asturias after receiving the Nobel Prize, whose call for post-colonial creative forces resounds as loud today as it did 50 years ago. Let me read a few of his works. My voice on the threshold, my voice coming from afar, on the threshold of the academy. It's difficult to become a member of a family, and it is easy. The stars know it. The families of luminous torches. To become a member of the Nobel family, to become an heir of Alfred Nobel. I do not know if the comparison is too daring, but it is necessary. The use of destructive forces, the secret which Alfred Nobel extracted from nature, made possible in our America the most colossal enterprises, among them the Panama Canal, the magic of catastrophe, which could be compared to the thrust of our novels, I would say of our art, call upon to destroy unjust structures in order to make way for a new life. The secret minds of the people, buried under tons of misunderstanding, prejudices, and taboos, bring to light in our narrative, in our music, between fables and myths, with blows of protest, testimony, and denouncement, dikes of letters, which, like sand, contain reality to let the dream flow free, or, on the contrary, contain the dream to let reality escape. Cataclysms, which engender a geography of madness, terrifying traumas, such as the conquest, this cannot be the antecedents of a literature of cheap compromise. And thus, our novels, our music, appear to Europeans as illogical or aberrant. They are not shocking for the sake of shocking. It's just that what happened to us was shocking. Continents submerged in the sea, races castrated as they searched to independence, and the fragmentation of the New World. The dimensions of our conflicts in our past centuries have been catastrophic. Scaffolding, ladders, new vocabularies, the primitive recitation of text, the rhapsodist, and later, once again, the broken trajectory, the new tongue, long chains of words, thought unchained, until arriving once again after the bloodiest lexical battles at one's own expression. There are no rules, they are invented. And after much invention, the grammarians come with their language streaming shears. Grammar becomes an obsession. The risk of anti-grammar. And that is where we are now, the search for dynamic words, another magic. Not to substitute words for things, to look for word things, word beings, and the problems of men in addition. Evasion is impossible. A continent that speaks. Do not ask us for genealogies, schools, treatises. We bring you the probabilities of a word, the probabilities of a world. Verify them, they are singular. And from there we have had to extract not the men of defeat, but the men of hope, that blind creature who wanders through our songs and through our ideas. And that's what I would like Elias to share with us now, how in his research he has used tools from Mexican thought to examine the earliest fragments of polyphony written in what was to become Mexico. Elias, my friend, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'd like to share my screen. Can you see my screen? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let me... Okay, I prepare a paper I'd like to read. Thank you so much to be here. Thank you so much to be here. It's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity of sharing with you some ideas about indigenous music and Mexican culture. They come from my own experience in the field of musicology and Latin American studies. I developed over 10 years in different academic programs. Before initiating this presentation, I'd like to express that the things I argue are connected with the political events we have seen in recent years. The removal of the Christopher Columbus statues from historical locations in very important cities along the Americas. The reason why I decided to spend a minute in this episode of our contemporary history, it's because these events show us how explosive could be the behavior of the people when they raise questions about their past. However, among the very different opinions adopted by the people and also by governments and politicians who are involved in these kind of acts, I believe that we get the job done if, as academics, preserve the liberty of thinking in different ways, even in opposition to the prevalent narratives. Let me start explaining that most of my work rises from philosophical discussions, especially those opened by intellectuals from Latin America who faced the problem of understanding history from structural perspectives. In this presentation, I will explain how it is possible to discuss the idea of Mexican culture and music in the frame of the philosophical work of the Mexican historian Edmundo O'Gorman, who is the author of a book in which the historiographical tradition about America is criticized. Around 1950, O'Gorman began to develop a theory to explain that America was not the result of a discovery made by Spaniards, but the result of a process of invention driven by the West culture and based on theological conceptions. Also, O'Gorman established that this process involves at least two internal processes. First, a geographical invention. Second, a historical or moral invention. Stated briefly, O'Gorman's theory is a proposal to explain in conceptual terms by which a to be possessed new world was created. We can summarize the basic content of this theory by the following sentences. The invention of America is an open and current process. It's an all-encompassing and invasive process. It has a structure, which is a double structure, natural and moral. Finally, it manifests a double unfolding movement to the external dimension of the objective reality and also to the internal dimension of the subjectivity. It is important to explain that in the middle of such a complex process, there is an anthropological dimension, which is shaped by the thoughts and actions of the people and their symbolic and material creations. According to this, music could be explained as a creation in which we can explore and discover particular anthropological features of our continent. However, music also could be considered as a fragment of the timeline of the general process of America's invention, which involves the invention of the American Indian. While some academics consider that the idea of Mexican music is no more than a nationalistic instrument useful to politicians, I think that this notion could be taken as a key to get access to the whole social and cultural history of our Americans. It is true that Mexican music is an artificial notion in the following sense. It gathers exclusively the music created by the population's diverse circumstances were joined in the political and administrative unit called Mexico in the 19th century. However, if we look for connections between the Mexican music of that period of time and its historical social roots, we can reach new areas and levels of knowledge that the nationalistic ideology and its supposed critics in the postmodern theory have not explored. For example, the ancient familiarity between Mexico's official music expressions and the music of the indigenous population living in the territories that Mexico lost in the war with the USA in 1848. Let me show you the following social linguistic facts. First, the names of the family languages or isolated languages that were spoken by the native populations precisely on the territories lost by Mexico. Pay attention, please, to the highlighted term. Second, a map that represents the pre-contact distribution of Uto-Azteca languages, the main linguistic family consisting of over 30 languages, among others, the Nahuatl, which today is spoken by more than 1.5 million people in Mexico. So, why are these facts important to an explanation about the history of music in Mexico? My answer is because these facts allow us to imagine how deep and disseminated are the linguistic roots of the Aboriginal Mexican music. For example, the chants in the Nahuatl languages that were heard by the European friars at the beginning of the colonization. Also, we can conceptualize the historical density of the new liturgical music that was composed in indigenous languages to spread the sacred word of the Lord of Jews and Christians. Here, we can see a particular example of the books of music that were produced to convert indigenous populations to Christianity. Arguably, this codex was copied in the Colegio de Santa Cruz de Tlatelolco, today Mexico City, an important religious institution that was driven by the most important Franciscan and their most advanced Indian pupils over the 16th century. In that place were written several studies on ancient Mexican culture and Nahuatl language. This book is special because in its folios were copied two polyphonic pieces in Nahuatl that honor the Virgin Maria, who is the most recognized syncretic symbol of Mexico. Let me say that President Biden talked about his personal relation with the Virgin Maria of Guadalupe in his first virtual conversation with the Mexican President López Obrador 3 weeks ago. Despite it acceptable that these pieces were composed by a converted Indian who learned from friars the musical compositional system, also it is true that in the historical context of the creation of these pieces, the Mexicans and Spaniards were not the only people who needed the Nahuatl as a linguistic instrument to survive the colonization or execute its violence. Today we know that also the Jews who adopted by force the Christianity to face the religious persecution in Spain, it means the Jews who arrived in Mexico, by then New Spain, as a new Christians. We know that some of them were able to use Nahuatl language as encrypted code to interchange secret information or as a means to get favors or protections from Indians. In any case, it is clear that polyphonic music, like the Nahuatl compositions copied in the Codex Valdensis, can be the paradigmatic pieces of art that concentrate interests and expectations of life as different as the three main theological conceptions that conform the idea of America. What if we try to see America as Temoanchan? It is the flourish paradise inhabited by Xochiquetzali, the dancing goddess of love, that was imagined by the ancient Mexicans. What if we try to understand the universal meaning of the idea of the new world posed by the Christians to get a second chance to save the humankind? What if we see America as a lost paradise we can recover, just as the Jews did believe in? What if we accept the idea of America as an endless mythical and mystical invention? What if we listen to our music as an imaginary road to get just this? I finish my presentation sharing with you these questions, convinced that we need to put light on our history, not fire. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elias. Thank you, Benjamín and Warren. I mean, we wish that we will carry on because this is just extraordinary. What an honor, what a privilege to be listening to you. And thank you so much. There is so much there that we can unpack. And we have a few minutes for questions. And I would like to start by asking you. You were talking about this idea of there is no such a thing as a Mexican music. Is there such a thing as a national music? Do you think could that be applied to the music of Mexico, for instance, or to the music of New Zealand, or just like Octavio Paz, the Mexican writer, said, in the case of literature, I mean, there is no such a thing as a national literature, but it's a single language. It's the language that we share. So language will cross borders, and perhaps that can be applied to music too. Could you please elaborate on that?
Yes. I think Mexican music is useful as a concept, as a theoretical concept. Only that, I think. We can, when we think about our reality, on our past or future, we need concepts. And Mexican music could be a concept. Mexican culture could be a concept. We can debate if it is a artificial construction or if the politicians use them, this concept also. But for us as academics, we need concept, and I think it is a powerful idea if we try as an open instrument to get new ideas.
Yeah, I would say that nations are imaginary communities, to quote Benedict Anderson. And more than to speak about the music of New Zealand or the music of Mexico, we can speak about the musics in New Zealand and the musics in the region, in the geography. But at the end, listening to Warren, I can see the importance of birds and sounds of nature in the Nahuatl poetry and in the music and poetry of the Mayas and other originary peoples in North America. So is the music of mankind, and is music the one thing that keeps us together? Because we may speak different languages, we may have different skin colors, we may eat different fish or vegetables, but every nation, every people, every human being has music as something that, of course, can give them identity, but more than identity, gives us meaning.
Wonderful. That's all. Yes, Warren, will you like to add to that, please?
It's a very good question, Leonel, because this is often a debate here in New Zealand is what defines Maori music from non-Maori music. And because we have funding bodies that contribute to both, so often there's a bit of confusion as to what defines Maori music and what defines non-Maori music, when actually, like you said, Benjamin, fantastically, it's a human construct. But I also feel like it's a human construct that is a conduit that ties us with nature all over the world. And Elias, fantastic thoughts shared there, brother. There are parallels with what you said with what's happening here in New Zealand, what's happening there. We've had colonization issues that are ongoing, but also this the kind of capitalist approach that music has turned into an industry which is very profit driven, and we've almost lost that connection to ancient origins, which it feels like we are all on this journey of reconnecting and celebrating our connection with nature. So I agree with you, Benjamin. You know, it's a humankind activation.
I think that Papatanuku and Xochiquetzal are two names for the same goddess, and perhaps Santa Maria is another name of the same figure.
Yeah, wonderful.
And I will have to say, Benjamín, that there is a tohil here, a tohil from the Mayan cosmogony. There is a tohil here in Maori cosmogony to Maui. So we do find in this language this connection, you know, this conversation that keeps on going across cultures and across borders and across politics, and you know, despite everything that's happening, we're all connected. So it's wonderful to have this conversation with you all. And in fact, I would like to remind people who are following us on the that at the end of this colloquium, it will be 5 p.m. in Mexico and 12 noon here in New Zealand. We'll come back to some of these issues because we'll have two colleagues talking about indigenous philosophy, Maori philosophy, and Nahuatl language and in history. So we will carry on with this conversation, but what a way to start. I'm deeply moved and grateful that you have shared these thoughts with us, and we have to carry on. We have to continue having these conversations, and it's great that we got to know each other, and we'll carry on. And we have a few more seconds there for final thoughts that you would like to share with everyone. Yes, Elias.
Thank you. I think people I don't have problems if people consider Mexican music as his music. People can enjoy the music they consider is their music. But I think we academics have the responsibility to provide new ideas, new discourses, new narratives in order to give many possibilities to help people or to share people ideas to understand his reality. I think this is our job in this kind of discussions. No, that's all.
And I would like to say that music is a gift. So it's not that the people of New Zealand cannot sing Verdi, and one of the greatest singers in history comes from New Zealand, Kirite Kanawa, or that people from Germany cannot play Mexican music, because like food, music is a gift. So, kia ora.
Kia ora, Benjamín.
Oh, well said. Yeah, I agree. I agree, Benjamin. It's to be shared and celebrated. And probably one thought there, something going back to what you mentioned, Elias, with the embedding of knowledge and narratives and even secrets you mentioned in music. There's something there that I think as academics we can remind our students that it's not just about entertainment. Exactly. It has a function. It's always had a function other, as well as, you know, we have entertainment evenings, but there are stories, narratives, and historic, you know, heroes, like you mentioned, Leonel, with Maui, and it's cross-generational. You know, I like to think in 1,000 years' time that it's a means to record stories, ancient stories, and remind our great grandchildren, future generations, of where we all come from. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Gracias.
Kia ora.
Gracias and thank you. So we have a couple of minutes before we start the next panel. Yes.